I never imagined the day would come when my own children would stand over me, watching me gasp for breath on my kitchen floor. My ribs screamed with pain where my son Jack had shoved me against the counter, all because I'd refused to hand over the money from selling my farm. As sirens wailed in the distance, I saw something in their eyes that changed everything. They weren't looking at their mother anymore. They were looking at an obstacle. That's when I knew exactly what I had to do. The morning sun cast long shadows across my 180 acres of farmland in rural Pennsylvania, the same land my grandparents had cleared with their bare hands during the Great Depression. I stood on the front porch coffee mug, warming my arthritic fingers, knowing this view would soon belong to someone else. At 65, my body could no longer keep pace with the demands of farming, and the medical bills had finally caught up with me. My name is Monica, and for 43 years this farm had been my entire world. Frank and I raised our 2 children here, teaching them to plant corn in neat rows and collect eggs while the rooster crowed. We built a life on these rolling hills until cancer stole Frank from me 8 years ago. The experimental treatments cost everything we'd saved, plus a second mortgage on the property. I sold the tractors, leased out parcels, and worked the farmer's market every weekend selling tomatoes and squash to keep the lights on. Jack, my oldest at 42, inherited Frank's strong jaw and broad shoulders, but none of his work ethic. After high school, he'd bounced between construction jobs, always convinced the next big opportunity waited around the corner. I'd funded 3 of his business ventures, each one burning through my savings faster than drought consumes a creek. $85,000 vanished into failed restaurants, construction equipment that never generated profit, and a sports bar that closed within 6 months. Sarah came next, 4 years younger and blessed with her father's charm. She'd found success as a real estate agent in Philadelphia, or so I believed until the phone calls started. Creditors, casino managers' names I didn't recognize demanding money she owed. Twice I'd paid off her gambling debts, $45,000 total, believing her promises that she'd get help. The help never came, just more requests disguised as emergencies. Despite everything, I loved my children with the fierce devotion only a mother understands. When Frank died, they'd each taken their grief and run toward their separate lives in the city. Visits became phone calls became text messages, and eventually even those grew sparse unless money was involved. I told myself they were busy building careers, finding their paths. The truth sat heavier on my chest than any physical ailment. The Parkinson's diagnosis arrived like an unwelcome guest last spring. My trembling hands weren't just fatigue from farm work anymore. The doctor explained how the disease would progress, stealing my independence piece by piece. The medication helped, but cost more than I earned at the market. When the Agricultural Corporation offered $2.8 million for the farm, I saw it as God's provision, a way to afford proper care without burdening anyone. I'd signed the initial papers yesterday, closing scheduled for tomorrow afternoon. The plan seemed simple enough: move to a senior living community with medical staff, keep enough money for 20 years of care, and perhaps travel while my body still allowed it. I'd even imagined visiting the Grand Canyon, something Frank and I had always postponed for next year. The sound of tires on gravel interrupted my morning ritual. 2 cars pulled into the driveway, and my heart lifted seeing Jack's pickup truck and Sarah's white sedan. They so rarely visited together anymore. I set down my coffee and walked toward them, ignoring the protest from my hip. "Mom." Sarah emerged from her car wearing a designer suit that probably cost more than I spent on clothes in 5 years. Her embrace felt perfunctory, air kisses barely grazing my cheeks. "You look tired. Are you eating enough?" Jack's greeting was a brief nod as he surveyed the property. "Heard you're selling to those corporate vultures. Could have at least asked if I wanted first dibs." "Since when do you want to farm?" I asked, leading them inside. The kitchen hadn't changed much since their childhood, same oak table where they'd done homework, same cast iron stove I'd inherited from my mother. Sarah wrinkled her nose at the dated appliances while Jack helped himself to coffee without asking. "We need to talk about the sale," Sarah announced, settling into her old chair. "Jack and I have been discussing your future." My future, as if I hadn't spent months agonizing over every detail. "I've found an incredible investment opportunity." Jack interrupted, pulling out his phone to show me graphs I didn't understand. "Cryptocurrency mining operation, ground floor opportunity. With your capital, we could triple the investment within 18 months. And I've identified 3 properties in Phoenix ready to flip." Sarah added, spreading glossy photos across the table. "The market there is exploding. We renovate, stage, and sell for massive profits. I just need initial capital." I studied my children's eager faces, seeing strangers wearing familiar features. "The money from the farm is for my medical care. I've been diagnosed with Parkinson's disease." The silence lasted 3 heartbeats before Sarah laughed. "Mom, you're being dramatic. Lots of people have tremors. Have you gotten a second opinion?" "Dr. Patel is one of the best neurologists in the state," I replied quietly. "Doctors always exaggerate to make money," Jack scoffed. "You're fine. What you need is purpose, not some expensive retirement home. This investment would set us all up for life." Us. The word hung between us like laundry frozen on the line. "I need this money to survive, Jack. The medication alone costs $800 a month. Physical therapy, eventual in-home care modifications to wherever I live." "That's what we're for," Sarah interjected smoothly. "Family takes care of family. You invest with us now and we'll make sure you're looked after." I wanted to ask where they'd been the past 8 years, why family obligations only surfaced when money appeared. Instead, I stood slowly, joints protesting the movement. "I'm happy you're here, but I've made my decision. The buyer transfers funds tomorrow, and I'll be moving to Sunrise Manor next month. They have an excellent medical wing." Jack's face darkened, reminding me of storm clouds gathering over the cornfields. "After everything we've been through, you're choosing strangers over your own children." "I'm choosing stability over speculation," I corrected gently. Sarah's tears appeared on cue, a skill she'd perfected in childhood. "I can't believe you'd be so selfish. Do you know what I'm facing? My credit cards are maxed out. I could lose everything." The admission slipped out before she could stop it, and Jack shot her a warning glare. Pieces of a puzzle I hadn't realized existed began forming in my mind. They hadn't come to celebrate the sale or express concern for my health. They'd come for money like vultures circling a dying animal. "Perhaps we should discuss this after you've both had time to process the news," I suggested, moving toward my bedroom. "I need to rest before my doctor's appointment." Jack stood abruptly, the chair scraping against worn linoleum. "There's nothing to process. You're making a mistake, and we're trying to save you from it." "Save me." The words escaped sharper than intended. Where was this salvation when I was working sunrise to sunset, hands too swollen to make a proper fist? Where was this concern when I sold your father's truck to pay the electric bill? "Don't be martyr, Mom," Sarah snapped, her tears evaporating. "We've all made sacrifices." I looked at my daughter, searching for the little girl who once helped me plant sunflowers along the fence line. That child had vanished, replaced by someone who viewed me as a means to an end. The realization settled in my stomach like a stone in still water. "I'm going to lie down," I announced, exhaustion suddenly overwhelming. "You're welcome to stay for lunch, but the topic is closed." As I reached the hallway, I heard Jack mutter to Sarah, "She'll come around. They always do when you apply the right pressure." The words followed me to my bedroom, where I sat on the quilt my grandmother had stitched by candlelight. Outside the window, a red-tailed hawk circled lazily above the fields. I envied its freedom, its ability to soar away from earthbound troubles. Tomorrow couldn't come fast enough. I needed this sale finalized before my children's desperation transformed into something worse. The afternoon stretched like taffy as I tried to rest, but Jack and Sarah's voices carried through the thin walls. They weren't even attempting to whisper anymore, their conversation a mix of frustration and strategy. I pressed my face into the pillow, willing the pounding in my temples to subside. "She's always been stubborn," Sarah's voice filtered through. "Remember when she refused to sell after Dad died? We could have all been set years ago." "This time's different," Jack responded. "She's already signed. Money hits the account tomorrow. We just need to redirect it." Redirect. The word sent cold fingers walking down my spine. I forced myself upright, reaching for the glass of water on my nightstand. The tremor in my hand sent liquid sloshing onto the worn carpet. 8 years of managing alone, and now they appeared like sharks smelling blood in the water. A knock rattled my door. "Mom, we need to talk." Sarah's voice had shifted to honey-sweet concern. "I'm resting," I called back. "This can't wait," Jack insisted, and before I could protest, the door swung open. They filled my small bedroom, making the space feel cramped and airless. Sarah perched on the edge of my bed while Jack leaned against the dresser, arms crossed like a bouncer refusing entry. "We've been discussing your situation," Sarah began, as if my life were a problem requiring their solution. "And we're worried you're not thinking clearly." "My thinking is fine," I assured them, standing despite the protest from my hip. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to start dinner." Jack shifted, blocking the doorway. "You're not listening, Mom. This affects all of us. That farm is our inheritance." "Inheritance comes after death," I reminded him. "I'm still very much alive." "Barely," Sarah muttered, then caught herself. "I mean, with your condition and all." The cruelty of her words stole my breath more effectively than any physical blow. This was my daughter, the baby I'd sung to sleep, now calculating my demise like items on a grocery list. "I need you both to leave," I managed, voice steady despite the trembling in my chest. "Not until we resolve this," Jack stated flatly. "Sarah's in real trouble, Mom. She owes people money. Bad people." Sarah's mask slipped, revealing genuine fear beneath the manipulation. 500,000, Mom. I promised Marcus I'd have it after the farm sold. He's not patient." "Marcus." I recognized the name from her social media posts, the boyfriend with expensive cars and unexplained wealth. Another piece clicked into place. "That's not my responsibility," I said firmly, trying to edge past Jack. "Everything's always about responsibility with you." He exploded, face flushing red. "What about compassion? What about helping your family?" "I've helped." The words burst out, years of suppressed frustration finally finding voice. "Every failed business, every gambling debt, every crisis you've manufactured. When does it end?" "When you stop being selfish," Sarah shrieked, jumping to her feet. "That money could save my life." I pushed past Jack, needing space, needing air. They followed me to the kitchen, their demands growing louder, more insistent. My hands shook as I reached for my phone on the counter. "Who are you calling?" Jack demanded. "My lawyer. This conversation is over." Jack's hand shot out, knocking the phone from my grasp. It clattered across the floor screen, cracking against the table leg. We all froze, the violence of the action shocking in its suddenness. "You broke my phone," I said stupidly, as if that were the only thing broken in this room. "I'll buy you a new one," Jack snarled, "with my share of the money." "There is no share," I shouted, surprising myself with the volume. "The money is mine. I worked for it. I earned it, and I'll spend it how I choose." Sarah darted toward the hallway. "Where does she keep the paperwork, Jack? Maybe there's something we can use." "Don't you dare," I warned, moving to block her path. That's when everything shifted into slow motion. Sarah fainted left, and as I turned to follow, Jack stepped forward. His hands connected with my shoulders, not a push exactly, more like a forceful redirection. But at 65, with arthritic joints and Parkinson's affecting my balance, it might as well have been a linebacker's tackle. I stumbled backward, arms windmilling for balance that wouldn't come. The granite edge of the counter rushed up to meet me, connecting with my ribs in an explosion of white-hot agony. The crack was audible like a branch snapping under too much snow. I hit the floor, hard breath driven from my lungs in a whoosh that left me gasping like a landed fish. "Mom!" Sarah's scream sounded distant, muffled by the roaring in my ears. I lay on the cold linoleum, each attempt to breathe sending lightning bolts through my torso. Above me, Jack's face cycled through emotions, shock, fear, and then something worse. Calculation. "Quick," he hissed to Sarah. "Find the power of attorney papers in her desk. We'll say she signed them before the fall." Through the haze of pain, I watched my daughter nod and disappear down the hall. This wasn't happening. These weren't my children. My children had loved me once, hadn't they? "The old bat's tougher than she looks," Sarah called from the office. "Maybe we need Dr. Harrison to declare her incompetent." Dr. Harrison. Sarah's boyfriend wasn't Marcus, after all, but a doctor. The pieces of their plan crystallized with horrifying clarity. They hadn't just come for money. They'd come prepared to take it by any means necessary. Jack knelt beside me, his face a mask of false concern. "Mom, can you hear me?" "You fell. You're confused. Don't try to talk." I wanted to scream, to rage against this betrayal, but my ribs screamed louder. Each shallow breath was a victory and a torment. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed, growing closer. Had someone called for help? Or was I imagining salvation that would never come? "Got them," Sarah announced, triumphantly waving papers I couldn't quite focus on. "And look, there's already a signature line for transfer of assets. We just need—" The kitchen door burst open, cutting off her words. Walter McCrae, my neighbor for 30 years, filled the door frame like an avenging angel. His weathered face took in the scene, me on the floor, Jack kneeling beside me with fake concern, Sarah clutching legal documents like a thief caught red-handed. "Saw your car when I came to deliver eggs," Walter said slowly, his tone deceptively calm. "Heard shouting. Called 911 and my daughter, Janet. She's the county prosecutor, you know." The papers fluttered from Sarah's hands like dying moths. Jack stood abruptly, stepping away from me as if distance could erase his actions. "She fell," Jack said quickly. "We were trying to help." Walter's eyes still sharp at 72, despite his years missed nothing. "That's so, because from where I was standing outside that window looked like assault to me." The sirens crescendoed, and suddenly, my kitchen filled with paramedics and uniforms. Professional hands assessed my injuries while radios crackled with medical jargon. As they prepared to lift me onto a gurney, I caught Walter's eye. "I saw it all, Monica," he said quietly. "Every bit of it." The last thing I saw before they wheeled me out was Jack and Sarah standing in my kitchen like strangers wearing my children's faces. They'd crossed a line that could never be uncrossed, broken something that could never be repaired. But as the ambulance doors closed and the siren wailed our departure, I felt something besides pain blooming in my chest. Determination. They thought they'd broken me, but they'd only broken my ribs. What they'd actually done was far worse for them. They'd set me free. The emergency room smelled of industrial disinfectant, and fear a combination that brought back memories of Frank's final days. But unlike then when I'd been surrounded by love and support, now I lay alone on a narrow bed, while doctors prodded my screaming ribs. 2 fractures, possibly 3, Dr. Nguyen announced, studying the X-ray images. "You're lucky. A few inches lower and we'd be discussing punctured organs." Lucky. The word felt like sandpaper in my mouth. How was any of this lucky? The paramedic said you fell. She made it a question, her dark eyes studying me with professional assessment. The bruising pattern suggests impact with significant force. Before I could respond, commotion erupted in the hallway. Jack's voice loud and demanding, insisting on seeing his mother. Sarah's higher pitch joined the chorus, playing the role of distraught daughter to perfection. "My children," I explained unnecessarily. "Would you like me to let them in?" Dr. Nguyen asked carefully. The memory of Jack's hands on my shoulders, the crack of bone against granite, made my decision easy. "No, please no." She nodded as if this response didn't surprise her. "I'll inform security. In the meantime, Officer Chen would like to speak with you if you're feeling up to it." The young officer who entered looked impossibly young, barely older than my grandchildren would be if I had any. He pulled out a notepad with practiced efficiency. "Mrs. Monica Reeves, I understand there was an incident at your home. Can you tell me what happened?" I opened my mouth, then closed it. Accusing my children of assault felt like swallowing glass, each word cutting deeper than the last. There was an argument about money." "Take your time," Officer Chen encouraged. "Start from the beginning." So I did, each detail pulling from me like splinters from flesh. The forced visit, the demands for money, Jack blocking my path, the push that sent me into the counter. By the time I finished, my pillow was damp with tears I hadn't realized were falling. "Your neighbor, Mr. McCrae, provided a statement," Officer Chen said gently. "He witnessed the assault through your kitchen window. His daughter, Janet McCrae, from the prosecutor's office, is already involved." A knock interrupted us, and a nurse peered in. "Mrs. Reeves, you have another visitor. Says he's your neighbor." Walter's familiar figure appeared in the doorway, carrying a small vase of sunflowers that must have come from his wife's garden. The normalcy of the gesture nearly undid me. "Thought you could use some cheering up," he said gruffly, setting the flowers on the bedside table. "Martha sends her best." Officer Chen excused himself, promising to return later for a formal statement. Once alone, Walter pulled the visitor's chair close to my bed, his weathered hands folding over the handle of his cane. "I need to tell you what I saw," he began without preamble. "Was coming over with fresh eggs like every Tuesday. Heard voices through your kitchen window, angry ones. That's not like you, Monica, so I stopped to listen." Shame heated my cheeks. "Walter, I'm so sorry you had to witness that." "Don't you apologize for nothing," he said firmly. "What I saw was that boy of yours put hands on you. Saw him knock the phone away. Saw him push you into that counter. Sarah was heading for your office talking about papers. They want the money from the farm sale," I admitted. "All of it." Walter's face darkened. "Over my dead body. Janet's already pulled the security footage from the grocery store across the street. Shows both their cars arriving together like they planned this." Before I could respond, another knock sounded. This time, a different nurse entered, Patricia Hollowell, whose name tag triggered recognition. I'd taught her in Sunday school 20 years ago, watched her grow from a gap-toothed third grader into this competent medical professional. "Mrs. Monica." Her face lit up with pleasure that dimmed as she took in my condition. "What on earth happened to you?" "It's a long story," I began, but Patricia was already checking my chart, her expression growing darker with each line. "I need to tell you something," she said, glancing at the door before continuing. "Your daughter was here last month, not as a patient but asking questions about you, specifically about your medical history and mental state." The room tilted slightly. "What?" "She claimed to be concerned about your well-being, said the family was worried about dementia. I told her medical information was confidential, but she kept pushing. Asked if we did competency evaluations, how they worked, who performed them." Each word felt like another brick in the wall of their deception. How long had they been planning this? "There's more," Patricia continued. "She was with a man she introduced as Dr. Harrison. I remembered because he seemed too interested in our procedures for involuntary psychiatric holds." "Security cameras," Walter asked sharply. Patricia nodded. Everything's recorded. I can have our security department pull the footage if needed. Please do, Walter said before I could respond. Janet will want to see it. As Patricia left to arrange the footage, I lay back against the thin hospital pillows, mind reeling. This wasn't a spontaneous grab for money. This was calculated, planned, executed with cold precision. My children had become strangers capable of conspiracy. I need to call David Brennan, I said, referring to my lawyer. The closing is tomorrow. Already done, Walter assured me. Called him from your kitchen while waiting for the ambulance. He's aware of the situation and put a hold on everything. Nothing moves without your direct authorization. Relief flooded through me like warm honey. Thank you. I don't know how to repay. 43 years of being good neighbors is payment enough, he interrupted. Besides, Martha would skin me alive if I let anything happen to you. You know how she is about her canning partner. Despite everything, I smiled. Martha McCrae and I had won blue ribbons at the county fair for our strawberry preserves 5 years running. Some things at least remained constant in a world suddenly tilted off its axis. Your room assignment is ready. A transport orderly announced, arriving with a wheelchair. Let's get you settled. The move to a proper hospital room took 20 minutes of careful maneuvering. Every bump sent fresh lightning through my ribs, but I gritted my teeth and endured. I'd endured worse, though nothing had ever hurt quite like my children's betrayal. My new room came with an unexpected bonus, a roommate. The elderly woman in the next bed looked up from her knitting with sharp blue eyes that missed nothing despite her advanced age. Rough day? She asked, her voice carrying the steel of old New England money. You could say that I managed as the orderly helped me into bed. Eleanor Whitmore. She introduced herself. Retired attorney, current patient thanks to a hip replacement. Couldn't help but overhear some commotion in the hall. Your children seem vocal. As if on cue, Jack's voice boomed from somewhere nearby, demanding to know my room number. Security's response was too muffled to make out, but his subsequent cursing carried clearly. That would be my son, I admitted, mortification burning my cheeks. Eleanor's needles never paused in their rhythmic clicking. Family disputes over money bring out the worst in people. Seen it hundreds of times in my career. Though I must say, pushing one's mother into a counter represents a new low. You heard about that. Nurses talk, she said simply. Also, your charming son was on his phone in the hallway earlier, discussing the need to get papers signed today because, and I quote, the farm closes tomorrow. I closed my eyes, exhaustion pulling at me like an undertow. I don't know what to do. They're my children. I raised them better than this. Sometimes people choose to be worse than they're raising, Eleanor observed. The question now is what you choose to do about it. If you need legal advice, I may be retired, but my son Marcus runs one of the best investigative firms in the state. He specializes in elder abuse cases. Elder abuse. The words hit like cold water. Is that what this was? I'd changed their diapers, kissed their scraped knees, celebrated their victories, and mourned their defeats. How had we arrived at elder abuse? I appreciate the offer, I said carefully. Right now I just need to rest. Eleanor nodded, returning to her knitting. The offer stands. Though I should mention Marcus is already investigating a Dr. Harrison for medical insurance fraud. Small world, isn't it? My eyes snapped open. Did you say Dr. Harrison? Indeed. Fascinating case. He's been declaring elderly patients incompetent at an alarming rate, always seems to benefit financially somehow. Why do you know him? My daughter does. I whispered, the final puzzle piece clicking into place. Eleanor's needles stopped their clicking. She set aside her knitting and reached for her phone with surprising agility for someone recovering from hip surgery. Marcus, yes. I know what time it is. I need you here first thing tomorrow morning. Bring the Harrison files. Yes, all of them. She hung up and fixed me with those sharp blue eyes. Mrs. Reeves, I believe we have a great deal to discuss. But first you rest. Tomorrow we go to war. War. The word should have frightened me. Instead, lying in that hospital bed with broken ribs and a broken heart, it felt like salvation. My children had chosen this path, had plotted and schemed, and ultimately assaulted me for money. They'd made their choices. Now it was time to make mine. Morning arrived with a symphony of hospital sounds, beeping monitors, squeaking cartwheels, and the efficient bustle of shift change. My ribs sang their own painful chorus with each breath, but my mind felt clearer than it had in years. Eleanor was already awake, her sharp eyes studying a stack of documents her son Marcus had delivered at dawn. Your Dr. Harrison is quite the entrepreneur, she announced without preamble. 12 elderly patients declared incompetent in the last 18 months. Guess how many had their assets transferred to family members who just happened to be his associates? All of them. I ventured, though the acid in my stomach already knew the answer. 11. The 12th died before the paperwork could be completed. Eleanor's tone could have frozen July corn. Your daughter appears in 3 of these cases as the real estate agent who handled the subsequent property sales. The room spun slightly. Sarah hadn't just planned to steal from me, she'd been practicing on others. My little girl who once sold Girl Scout cookies with earnest determination had become a predator circling the elderly and vulnerable. A knock interrupted my spiraling thoughts. Patricia entered with a breakfast tray and a conspiratorial smile. Thought you should know your children are in the lobby. They've been here since 6 demanding to see you. Security has them on a tight leash. Good, Eleanor said before I could respond. Mrs. Reeves needs time to consider her options. Actually, I heard myself say, let them come up in an hour. I want to see what they do next. Both women stared at me. Patricia recovered first. Are you sure after yesterday? I'm sure. The plan forming in my mind felt like sunrise after the longest night. But first I need some help setting the stage. Eleanor leaned forward, a shark smile spreading across her dignified features. Now you're thinking like a lawyer. What do you have in mind? They expect to find me broken, confused, vulnerable, I explained. So that's exactly what I'll give them. Patricia, is there any way to make me look worse than I am? Patricia's eyes sparkled with understanding. I might have some ideas. There's also a student nurse filming a documentary about hospital care. Very discreet, excellent with hidden cameras. Perfect. I turned to Eleanor. Can Marcus be here but not visible? He's already in the visitors' lounge with recording equipment. We suspected you might want documentation. Eleanor retrieved her knitting the picture of harmless elderly companionship. I'll just be here working on this baby blanket for my fictional granddaughter. The next hour passed in careful preparation. Patricia helped me appear more fragile, adjusting my position to emphasize discomfort, placing the oxygen monitor where it would be most visible. The student nurse Amy set up 3 different camera angles while pretending to check medical equipment. Remember, Eleanor coached confused, but not completely incoherent. Lead them into admissions without appearing to do so. Let them think they're in control. At exactly 8 o'clock, Jack and Sarah entered my room like wolves poorly disguised as sheep. Sarah carried a bouquet of grocery store carnations, the kind she knew I hated. Jack wore his only suit, the one from his 3rd wedding, trying to project respectability. Mom! Sarah rushed to my bedside, gripping my hand with practiced concern. We've been so worried the nurses wouldn't tell us anything. I let my voice quaver slightly. Sarah, is that you, honey? Everything's so fuzzy. Jack and Sarah exchanged a look of triumph so quick I might have missed it if I hadn't been watching for it. The fish had taken the bait. "Of course it's me, Mom," Sarah cooed. "You had a nasty fall. Do you remember what happened?" Fall. I blinked slowly, letting confusion cloud my features. "I was in the kitchen. You were there. Something about papers." "That's right," Jack jumped in eagerly. "You were getting the papers to sign about the farm sale. Remember, you wanted us to help manage the money." Eleanor's knitting needles clicked steadily, background noise that masked the soft whir of recording equipment. I squeezed my eyes shut as if trying to remember. "The money," I repeated slowly. "So much money. I don't know what to do with it all." "That's why we're here," Sarah assured me, pulling documents from her purse. "Dr. Harrison is coming to evaluate you just to make sure you're okay. Then we can take care of everything." "Dr. Harrison," I let fear creep into my voice. "Is he nice? I don't like mean doctors." "He's my boyfriend, Mom. He's very nice. He just wants to make sure you're thinking clearly." "But Jack said yesterday I was too incompetent to manage money," I said, watching confusion flicker across their faces. "Or was that today? I can't remember." Jack recovered quickly. "That was before your medication, Mom. You're much clearer now. Clear enough to sign these papers, right?" "What papers?" I peered at the documents with exaggerated confusion. There are so many words. "Just power of attorney," Sarah said smoothly. "So we can help while you recover. Standard procedure." Eleanor coughed delicately. "Excuse me, but perhaps the lady needs more time. These decisions shouldn't be rushed." Sarah's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing irritation before snapping back to false sweetness. "Of course not. We just want what's best for Mom." "Is that why you pushed me?" I asked, innocently, watching Jack's face drain of color. "Or did I dream that part?" "You're confused," Jack said quickly. "You fell. We tried to catch you." "Oh." I touched my ribs gingerly. "It hurt so much. Like when you were 16 and pushed me down the stairs because I wouldn't give you money for that concert." The silence in the room grew thick enough to spread on toast. That incident had happened, but we'd never spoken of it after Jack's tearful apology and promises to control his temper. Now, 26 years later, patterns had become prophecy. "Mom," Sarah's voice carried warning, "you're mixing up memories. That never happened." "Didn't it?" I let doubt color my words. "So many things feel mixed up. Like last month when you came here asking about my medical records. Or was that someone else?" Sarah went very still. "I've never been here before yesterday." "The nice nurse said you were here," I continued, playing confused. "With that doctor man. Asked about competency something. Such big words for my fuzzy brain." Eleanor's knitting needles had stopped their clicking. In the silence, we could hear Marcus's camera capturing every word from his hiding spot behind the partially closed bathroom door. "You must be mistaken," Sarah insisted, but sweat beaded on her upper lip despite the cool room. "Maybe," I agreed amiably. "Like when you told me you only owed $45,000 in gambling debts, but Jack said it was $500,000. Which number is right? Math is so hard now." The siblings turned on each other like startled cats. "You told her about Marcus," Sarah hissed. "You said she needed to know the stakes," Jack shot back. "Marcus," I repeated thoughtfully. "That's not the doctor's name. That's the man who wants his money. The one who'll hurt you if you don't pay. Right, sweetheart?" Sarah's carefully constructed facade crumbled entirely. What did you... Mom, you're scaring me." "I'm scaring you." I let out a laugh that was only partially manufactured. My own children conspire to steal my life savings, assault me in my kitchen plan, to have me declared incompetent, and I'm the scary one. "We can explain," Jack started, but I raised my hand. "No need. I heard everything yesterday. The power of attorney papers, the plan with Dr. Harrison, even the part where you called me an old bat." Eleanor chose that moment to speak up, her voice carrying decades of courtroom authority. I believe what you're describing constitutes conspiracy to commit elder abuse assault, attempted fraud, and possibly racketeering given the pattern with Dr. Harrison. Who the hell are you? Jack demanded, rounding on my roommate. Eleanor Whitmore, retired attorney, current patient, excellent hearing. She smiled pleasantly. My son Marcus is investigating Dr. Harrison for medical insurance fraud. Imagine my surprise when your mother's situation dovetailed so perfectly with his case files. As if summoned by his name, Marcus emerged from the bathroom, camera in hand. Got everything, including the admission about the gambling debts and the conspiracy with Harrison. Sarah made a sound like air escaping a punctured tire. Jack took 2 steps toward Marcus before apparently remembering the assault charges he already faced. This is entrapment, Sarah shrieked. You can't use any of this. Actually, Eleanor corrected mildly, your mother simply had a conversation with her children who visited voluntarily. No one forced you to admit to crimes, though I must say, criminals usually wait for their lawyers before confessing. You've saved the state considerable time and money. I pushed myself up despite the screaming protest from my ribs. The confused old woman act dropped away like a molted snakeskin. I want you both to leave. Don't come back. Don't call. Don't send flowers or cards or excuses. We're done. Mom, please. Sarah's tears looked real this time. We made a mistake. We were desperate. Desperate enough to plan this for months, to recruit a corrupt doctor, to study how to have me declared incompetent. I shook my head. That's not desperation. That's evil. Jack's face had progressed from pale to purple. You'll regret this. We're your children. The only family you have. No, I said quietly. You were my children. Now you're just 2 criminals who happen to share my DNA. Get out before I have security throw you out. They left in a flurry of threats and promises, their voices echoing down the hospital corridor until security finally silenced them. I sagged back against the pillow's adrenaline, abandoning me like a faithless friend. That was beautifully done, Eleanor complimented. You should have been a lawyer. I just wanted to be a good mother, I whispered, and finally allowed myself to cry. Patricia appeared as if by magic, tissues in one hand and a cup of tea in the other. You were a good mother, she said firmly. They chose to become bad people. That's on them, not you. Marcus was already on his phone with his contacts at the FBI, sharing the evidence that connected Sarah and Dr. Harrison to a broader pattern of elder abuse. Amy, the student nurse, promised to edit the footage for maximum impact in court. Eleanor continued knitting as if elderly women didn't regularly orchestrate sting operations from hospital beds. What happens now? I asked, feeling suddenly ancient. Now, Eleanor said with satisfaction, we make sure justice is served. Your farm sale will proceed as planned. Your children will face the consequences of their choices, and you, my dear, will start the life you deserve. I thought about Walter's sunflowers on my bedside table, about Patricia's kindness, about Eleanor's fierce protection of a woman she'd just met. My children had abandoned me, but somehow I'd found family anyway. There's something else, I said slowly. In Frank's papers, there's a second will. If I'm declared incompetent, everything goes to his brother, not the children. They don't know it exists. Eleanor's shark smile returned in full force. Oh, my dear, this just gets better and better. Marcus, make another call. We're going to need the full team for this one. As the room filled with purposeful activity, I closed my eyes and let myself rest. The hardest part was over. I'd looked my children in the eyes and seen the truth of what they'd become. Now all that remained was ensuring they faced justice for their choices. Tomorrow the farm sale would close. Tomorrow I'd begin my new life at Sunrise Manor. Tomorrow I'd wake up without the burden of enabling my children's worst impulses. But today, lying in a hospital bed with broken ribs and a broken heart, surrounded by people who'd chosen to protect rather than exploit me, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: hope. 3 days passed before I felt strong enough for what came next. The ribs still protested with every breath, but pain medication and Patricia's excellent care had worked their magic. More importantly, the legal machinery Eleanor and Marcus had set in motion was ready to spring. The farm closing is rescheduled for this afternoon, David Brennan, my lawyer, announced during his morning visit. The buyers were very understanding about the delay. And our other arrangements? I asked, adjusting my position in the hospital bed that had become my command center. All set. David's usually serious face cracked into what might generously be called a smile. Your children have been busy. Jack's been calling every hour demanding information about your condition and the sale. Sarah actually showed up at my office with Dr. Harrison in tow. Bold, Eleanor commented from her bed where she continued her eternal knitting. Stupid but bold. What did you tell them? I asked. That you'd requested a family meeting here at the hospital. 2:00 sharp. They seemed very eager to attend. David's expression suggested he knew exactly why they were eager. I'd spent 3 days planning this moment, consulting with Eleanor Marcus and Janet McCrae from the prosecutor's office. Every detail had been scrutinized, every word rehearsed. Still, my hands trembled slightly as 2:00 approached. Remember, Eleanor coached one final time, let them think they're winning until the trap is fully sprung. Give them enough rope to hang themselves, as my grandmother used to say. The room had been carefully arranged. Extra chairs created a semicircle around my bed, official-looking but not threatening. Marcus positioned himself by the window, ostensibly reading a magazine. 3 hidden cameras captured different angles, while Amy, the documentary student, worked openly with a small camera, having told the staff she was filming recovery stories. Walter arrived first, followed by Janet McCrae, who introduced herself to everyone as his daughter visiting from work. Patricia stationed herself near the door, ready to intercept any disruptions. The stage was set. At precisely 2:00, Jack and Sarah entered with their entourage. Dr. Harrison looked exactly as I'd imagined, mid-50s, silver-haired, wearing an expensive suit that screamed of other people's money. Sarah's friend, introduced as a notary named Brenda, clutched a leather folder of documents. Mom. Sarah rushed to embrace me, her perfume cloying in the small space. You look so much better. We've been terribly worried. Have you? I managed weak surprise. The nurses said you weren't allowed to visit. A misunderstanding, Jack said smoothly, pulling a chair close to my bed. We're here now. That's what matters. Dr. Harrison stepped forward with practiced charm. Mrs. Reeves, I'm Dr. Harrison. Sarah's told me so much about you. I thought I'd stop by to see how you're recovering. Are you my doctor? I asked, blinking in confusion that was only half feigned. I thought Dr. Nguyen. No, he assured me quickly. Just a friend of the family, though I am concerned about your mental state after such trauma. Falls can cause confusion in older patients. Eleanor coughed delicately. Dr. Harrison's eyes flicked to her dismissively before returning to me. Perfect. He'd already decided she was irrelevant, just another elderly woman in a hospital bed. I suppose we should discuss why you're all here, I said hesitantly. David said something about papers. Yes. Sarah produced documents with unseemly haste. Just some formalities to help manage things while you recover. Power of attorney, healthcare decisions, financial management. Standard stuff. I don't understand. I let my voice quaver. Why do you need power of attorney? Jack leaned forward, his expression one of paternal concern that might have been convincing if I hadn't known the truth. The farm sale, Mom. That's a lot of money to manage. We just want to help. But I already have plans for the money, I protested weakly. Plans can change, Dr. Harrison interjected smoothly, especially after a traumatic event. Sometimes what we thought we wanted isn't what's best for us. What's best? I repeated slowly. You mean like when Sarah came here asking about competency evaluations? The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Sarah's smile flickered like a candle in wind. I think you're confused, Mom, she said carefully. Am I touched my forehead dramatically. Patricia said, but maybe I dreamed it. So many strange dreams lately. Like hearing you tell Dr. Harrison I was too incompetent to manage money. Now, Dr. Harrison soothed, though sweat beaded on his upper lip. Let's not get agitated. Perhaps we should evaluate your current mental state. Evaluate, Eleanor spoke up from her bed. Are you Mrs. Reeves's treating physician? I'm a concerned medical professional, he replied stiffly. Interesting. What's your specialty? Eleanor's needles never paused their clicking. Psychiatry, he answered reluctantly. Geriatric psychiatry specifically, Eleanor pressed. Board-certified hospital privileges here. Dr. Harrison's face flushed. I don't see how that's relevant. Oh, but it is, Janet McCrae spoke up from her corner. Especially given your recent pattern of evaluating elderly patients you've never treated before. The trap was beginning to close, but I needed them to step fully inside. I'm so confused, I whimpered. Jack, you said yesterday I was too incompetent to manage money, but now you want me to sign papers? You're twisting things, Jack stammered. Am I let tears fill my eyes. Like when you pushed me, or was that twisted too? You fell, he insisted, then caught himself. I mean, you're remembering wrong. But Walter saw it, I said innocently. He was at the window, saw you push me into the counter, saw Sarah going for my papers. That's not twisted, is it? The notary, Brenda, had gone pale. She clearly hadn't signed up for witness intimidation and assault charges. Perhaps we should reschedule, she suggested nervously. No, Sarah snapped, then forced calm back into her voice. No, we need to do this today. The farm sale closes in 2 hours, I finished. I know, David told me. So much money. $2.8 million. That could solve all your problems, couldn't it, sweetheart? Something shifted in Sarah's eyes. The mask was slipping desperation bleeding through the cracks. Mom, please. You don't understand. I owe people money. Bad people. If I don't pay $500,000, I said clearly. To someone named Marcus. Not Dr. Harrison's first name, is it? Different Marcus, Sarah said quickly. Too quickly. Dr. Harrison stood abruptly. I think we should. Sit down, doctor, Marcus said from the window, no longer pretending to read. We're just getting to the interesting part. Who are you? Dr. Harrison demanded. Marcus Whitmore, private investigator. He produced his identification with a flourish. I've been investigating you for 6 months. Imagine my delight when you walked right into my hospital room. The notary was already backing toward the door, but Patricia blocked her path. I think you'll want to stay, Patricia said pleasantly. The FBI will have questions about how many fraudulent documents you've notarized. FBI, Brenda squeaked. Did I forget to mention that? Eleanor set aside her knitting with theatrical flair. Yes, the FBI is very interested in a pattern of elderly people being declared incompetent by Dr. Harrison, having their assets transferred to family members, and those family members coincidentally using the same notary and real estate agent. All eyes turned to Sarah, who had gone the color of curdled milk. It's not. I didn't. They came to me, she burst out. Harrison said it was legal. The old people were going to die anyway, and their families needed the money now. Sarah, Jack roared, but the dam had broken. What was I supposed to do? Sarah continued, tears streaming down her face. I owed so much money and you kept losing it on your stupid business ideas. At least my plan worked. Your plan? I sat up straighter, ignoring the protest from my ribs. How long have you been planning this, Sarah? 6 months, she whispered. Since Harrison and I started dating. He said you'd never agree to help, that you'd waste the money on some stupid retirement home instead of your family. By family, you mean yourselves, Walter said quietly from his corner. Sarah whirled on him. Yes, us. We're her children. That money should be ours. Interesting perspective. Janet McCrae stood, revealing the prosecutor's badge she'd kept hidden. Please continue. I'm fascinated by your definition of what children deserve. The silence that followed was absolute. Jack looked like he might vomit. Dr. Harrison had developed a tremor that would have concerned me in any other circumstance. Brenda the notary was crying quietly. Only Sarah still burned with defiance, too deep in her justification to see the walls closing in. You set me up, she accused, glaring at me with such venom that I flinched despite myself. No, I corrected quietly. You set yourself up. I just gave you the opportunity to show everyone who you really are. Mrs. Reeves. Dr. Harrison attempted one last play. Surely you don't want to see your daughter in trouble. If you sign these papers, we could work something out. Are you attempting to bribe a witness, Doctor? Janet asked with interest. Please do go on. This is excellent for my case. That's when Jack made his move. Whether from panic or desperation, he lunged toward my bed hands, reaching for the papers Sarah had brought. Just sign them, he shouted. Sign them, and this all goes away. He never made it. Walter, 72 years old and supposedly fragile, stuck out his cane with timing that would have impressed a vaudeville performer. Jack went sprawling, crashing into the medical equipment with a clatter that brought security running. 2 guards burst through the door just as Jack struggled to his feet, ready to charge again. They tackled him with professional efficiency, and within seconds he was face down on the linoleum, hands cuffed behind his back. Assault, Janet said calmly, making notes. Attempted coercion, conspiracy to commit fraud. This just keeps getting better. Dr. Harrison made a break for the door, but Marcus was faster. One arm across the doorway, and the doctor bounced back like he'd hit a wall. Going somewhere. The agents downstairs are eager to meet you. Agents! Harrison's voice cracked. Did I not mention? Eleanor smiled sweetly. The FBI has been waiting in the lobby. Something about RICO charges Medicare fraud and a multi-state investigation. You really should have been more careful about crossing state lines, Doctor. As security hauled Jack to his feet, he looked at me with eyes full of rage. This is your fault. You did this to us. No, I said, suddenly exhausted. You did this to yourselves. I just stopped enabling it. Sarah had collapsed into a chair, sobbing with the abandon of a child who'd finally realized the game was over. Mom, please. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean. I was scared. I know you were scared, I said gently. But you chose to hurt innocent people instead of facing your problems. You chose to hurt me, your mother, because it was easier than admitting you needed help. The gambling, she whispered. I couldn't stop. And then the debts got so big and Harrison said he knew a way. There's always another way, I told her. You just chose the one that hurt others instead of yourself. Janet stepped forward, all business now. Sarah Reeves, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, elder abuse, and theft. You have the right to remain silent. As they led my children away in handcuffs, I felt something inside me break and heal simultaneously. The mother's heart that had loved unconditionally shattered. But from its pieces, something stronger emerged. A woman who could love herself enough to say no. A woman who could choose justice over enabling. a woman who could finally live her own life. Well, Eleanor said into the silence that followed, that was invigorating. Better than cable television. Despite everything, I laughed. It hurt my ribs, but I didn't care. I was free. The aftermath of the arrests spread through the hospital like wildfire. Within an hour, reporters had gathered in the lobby drawn by the scandal of a respected psychiatrist arrested for elder abuse. By evening, the story had made local news, and my phone wouldn't stop ringing with calls from concerned friends and distant relatives who suddenly remembered I existed. Patricia helped me navigate the chaos, screening visitors and shielding me from the most intrusive questions. But some conversations couldn't be avoided, especially when they came with badges and legal authority. Mrs. Reeves. Agent Sarah Coleman from the FBI settled into the visitor's chair with a thick folder. I need to walk you through what we've uncovered. Your case broke open something much larger. I braced myself, ribs protesting as I adjusted position. How much larger? Dr. Harrison has been running this scheme across 3 states. 17 elderly victims that we've identified so far, possibly more. She spread photographs across my bedside table. Do you recognize any of these people? I studied the faces, all silver-haired, all smiling in what were clearly happier times. This one. I pointed to a woman with kind eyes. Margaret Hensley. We met at the farmer's market last year. She mentioned her son was pressuring her to sell her house. She passed away 3 months ago, Agent Coleman said quietly. 2 weeks after Dr. Harrison declared her incompetent. Her house was sold by her son for half its value to a company we've traced back to your daughter. The room spun slightly. I gripped the bed rail until my knuckles went white. Sarah was involved with all of these 6 that we can prove. She was the real estate agent of record for quick sales after the elderly owners were declared incompetent or died shortly after. The agent's voice carried no judgment, just facts that felt like physical blows. Eleanor, who'd been pretending to nap, spoke up. Classic racketeering pattern. Find vulnerable marks, compromise them medically, strip their assets. How long before they started escalating to murder? Oh, we're investigating 2 suspicious deaths, Agent Coleman admitted. Both occurred shortly after large insurance policies were taken out by family members working with Harrison. I thought I might be sick. My daughter hadn't just been willing to steal from me, she'd been part of something that might have killed people. How did I not see this? How did I raise someone capable of this? Con artists often come from normal families, the agent said with unexpected gentleness. Your daughter made choices. Those choices weren't your fault. A knock interrupted us. Walter peered in his weathered face, grim. Sorry to intrude, but there's something you need to know. Jack's construction company just filed for bankruptcy. Turns out he's been using it as a front to launder money for some unsavory folks. Laundering money. I couldn't process any more revelations. My son is a money launderer. Janet McCrae followed Walter in, looking like she'd aged 5 years in 5 hours. The construction company was building projects that only existed on paper. Investors would pay for developments that never broke ground. Classic Ponzi scheme with a side of money laundering for local drug operations. I closed my eyes, trying to shut out reality, but reality had developed claws and wouldn't let go. How long? At least 3 years, maybe longer. Janet pulled up a chair. Monica, I need to ask some difficult questions. Did you ever invest in Jack's company? No, I said, then paused. Wait. He asked me to co-sign a loan 5 years ago, said it was for equipment. I refused because I couldn't risk the farm. That refusal probably saved you from federal charges, Janet said bluntly. Everyone who co-signed is being investigated as potential accomplices. The next 3 days blurred together in a parade of investigators, prosecutors, and revelations. Each new detail painted a darker picture of who my children had become. Sarah's gambling debts weren't just from casinos. She'd been running illegal high-stakes games for wealthy clients, skimming from pots and extending credit at loan shark rates. Jack's construction crews were mostly undocumented workers. He'd been exploiting, paying them pennies while claiming full wages on his books. "Your children were criminals," Marcus summarized during one of our strategy sessions. "Not misguided kids or desperate people making bad choices. Career criminals who happen to share your DNA. The distinction mattered. It was the difference between mourning who they'd become and accepting who they'd always been. The investigation also revealed heroes in unexpected places. Patricia had been quietly documenting suspicious visits from family members, claiming concern about elderly patients. Her records helped identify 3 other potential victims before they could be fully exploited. Amy, the student nurse with the camera, had captured crucial evidence that would ensure convictions. Even the hospital administration, initially concerned about publicity, had rallied to protect their vulnerable patients. On the 5th day, David Brennan arrived with news about the farm sale. "The buyers are still interested, but they've reduced their offer by $200,000. They're concerned about the publicity. Let them walk," I decided, surprising myself with the firmness. "I'll find another buyer." "Actually," Eleanor interjected from her bed, where she'd become a permanent fixture in my life, "I might have a solution. My environmental foundation has been looking for land to create a nature preserve. We could match the original offer and guarantee the land stays undeveloped." I stared at her. "You want to buy my farm?" "The foundation does. I'm just a board member who happens to think your acreage would make an excellent wildlife sanctuary." She smiled. "Plus, the deal includes lifetime residency rights for you. Can't have a sanctuary without a caretaker." The generosity broke something loose in my chest. Tears came in a flood that seemed to wash away years of accumulated pain. Eleanor pretended to be absorbed in her knitting while I ugly cried into hospital tissues, mourning not just my children, but the life I'd built around enabling them. Walter brought updates from the outside world. Jack's arrest had triggered a federal investigation into the entire regional construction industry. 3 other companies were implicated in the money laundering scheme. Sarah's illegal gambling operation had connections to organized crime in Philadelphia, leading to additional arrests. Dr. Harrison, facing decades in prison, had agreed to testify against everyone in exchange for a reduced sentence. "They're turning on each other like rabid dogs," Walter reported. Jack's blaming Sarah for introducing him to the criminals. Sarah's claiming Jack forced her into the schemes. Harrison's throwing everyone under the bus to save his own skin. None of it surprised me anymore. Loyalty was just another transaction to them, worthless when the price got too high. The media attention intensified as the scope of the crimes became clear. Reporters called me a hero for exposing the elder abuse ring. I didn't feel heroic. I felt like a mother who'd failed so spectacularly that my children had become predators. During one particularly dark night when pain medication couldn't touch the ache in my chest, Eleanor spoke into the darkness. "I had a son once. Brilliant boy. Became a lawyer like me. Then he discovered cocaine and embezzlement went together wonderfully. He died in prison 10 years ago." I turned to look at her profile in the dim light. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. I mourned the boy he was, but I couldn't save the man he became. Neither can you save Jack and Sarah. They chose their path with eyes wide open." "How do you live with it?" I whispered. "By helping people like you, by making sure other elderly people don't suffer what my friends suffered when my son targeted them, by choosing to be better than my pain." She paused. "And by knitting. Lots and lots of knitting." Despite everything, I smiled. "What are you making now?" A blanket for your new home at Sunrise Manor. Thought you might like something cheerful for your fresh start. The investigation's full scope emerged during week 2. 17 elderly victims across 3 states. Over $12 million stolen through fraudulent transfers, quick sales, and mysterious deaths. A network of corrupt doctors, lawyers, real estate agents, and notaries all working together to strip the vulnerable of their life savings. My children weren't masterminds. They were cogs in a machine that consumed the elderly with ruthless efficiency. But they were willing cogs, eager participants who'd brought their own mother to the slaughter. The prosecutor laid out the charges in detail. Jack faced 25 years minimum for assault, fraud, money laundering, and racketeering. Sarah looked at 20 years for fraud, elder abuse, illegal gambling, and conspiracy. Neither would receive leniency, especially after turning on each other so readily. They'll probably serve 15 years minimum, Janet explained. More if the murder investigations pan out. They'll be in their 50s and 60s when they get out. I thought about visiting them before the trial, one last moment of connection. But what would I say? What words could bridge the chasm between a mother's love and the reality of their monstrosity? Eleanor, who'd become my constant advisor, counseled against it. Let them sit with their choices. Your presence would just give them another opportunity to manipulate you. She was right. Every interaction with my children had become a transaction, their love contingent on what they could extract. Even now, facing decades in prison, they'd only see me as a potential asset, someone who might pay for lawyers or speak on their behalf at sentencing. The decision to stay away felt like another death, but a necessary one. Some relationships were too poisoned to salvage, too dangerous to maintain. My children had taught me that blood meant nothing when weighed against greed. Instead, I focused on the positive connections that had emerged from tragedy. Walter visited daily, bringing news from the farm and terrible jokes that made me groan. Patricia continued her vigilant care, becoming more friend than nurse. Amy's documentary about elder abuse prevention would feature my story prominently, potentially saving countless others. Even Marcus, the gruff investigator, had become protective of me, promising to monitor my children's activities even after their convictions. You've built a better family, Eleanor observed one afternoon. One based on mutual respect rather than obligation. She was right. The family I'd birthed had betrayed me, but the family I'd chosen surrounded me with genuine care. It wasn't the life I'd planned, but perhaps it was the life I needed. The farm sale to Eleanor's foundation finalized on a crisp Tuesday morning. David handled the paperwork while I signed from my hospital bed, still too fragile for travel. $2.8 million earmarked for my care, and several charitable donations to elder abuse prevention organizations. I kept what I needed and gave away what I didn't, finding more satisfaction in philanthropy than I'd ever found in enabling my children's schemes. The wildlife sanctuary will be named after Frank, Eleanor announced. The Frank Reeves Nature Preserve. I think he would have liked that. I knew he would have. Frank had loved the land more than anything except our family. Now the land would outlive us all, protected from development and greed. It felt like redemption, a small victory against the forces that had tried to consume everything I'd built. As the sun set on my 17th day in the hospital, I sat by the window in a wheelchair watching the sky paint itself in shades of pink and gold. Tomorrow, I'd be discharged to Sunrise Manor, starting a new chapter at 65. My children sat in separate jails awaiting trials that would likely destroy any remaining bonds between them. The farm would soon shelter deer and birds instead of vegetables and memories. Everything had changed. Everything had broken. But from the wreckage, something new was growing. Not the life I'd planned, but perhaps the life I deserved. A life where love wasn't measured in dollars, where family meant more than blood, where an old woman's value exceeded her bank account. The unraveling was complete. Now it was time to weave something better from the threads that remained. The courthouse steps seemed steeper than I remembered, though. Perhaps that was age and healing ribs rather than architecture. 6 months had passed since that terrible day in my kitchen, and spring had arrived in Pennsylvania with its usual promise of renewal. I climbed slowly, Walter on one side and Eleanor on the other, my chosen family supporting me through what promised to be an excruciating day. "Remember," Eleanor murmured as we reached the top, "you're here for closure, not reconciliation. Don't let them manipulate you." Inside the courtroom buzzed with subdued energy. Media filled the back rows, eager to document the sentencing of what newspapers had dubbed the Elder Harvest Ring. Families of other victims nodded as I passed a silent sisterhood of the betrayed. I took my seat behind the prosecutor's table, hands folded over the statement I'd written and rewritten dozens of times. Jack entered first, shackled and wearing orange that drained what little color remained in his face. 6 months in federal detention had aged him 10 years. His hair, once thick like his father's, had thinned to wisps. He'd lost weight, leaving his face gaunt and hollow. When his eyes found mine, I saw a flicker of the boy who'd once brought me dandelions and called them flowers. Then his expression hardened and the stranger returned. Sarah followed, her designer clothes replaced by institutional beige. The gambling debts had caught up with her in detention when fellow inmates discovered she'd cheated their friends on the outside. A fading bruise colored her left cheekbone purple and green. She kept her eyes down, whether from shame or strategy I couldn't tell. Judge Martinez, a woman with steel gray hair and eyes that had seen too much, called the court to order. "We're here for sentencing in the matter of United States versus Jack Reeves and Sarah Reeves. I've reviewed the pre-sentencing reports, the victim impact statements, and the psychiatric evaluations. This case represents one of the most egregious examples of elder abuse I've encountered in 30 years on the bench." The prosecutor stood, outlining the full scope of the crimes one final time. 17 victims, $12 million stolen. 2 suspicious deaths still under investigation. A network of corruption that had treated the elderly like crops to be harvested and discarded. "Your Honor," the prosecutor concluded, "the defendants showed no mercy to their victims, including their own mother. We request the maximum sentences allowed by law." Jack's lawyer, a public defender who looked barely old enough to have graduated law school, made a valiant effort. He spoke of addiction to easy money, of pressure to succeed, of a father's early death derailing a young man's life. The words rang hollow in a courtroom filled with people who'd faced similar hardships without becoming predators. Sarah's attorney took a different approach, focusing on her gambling addiction and relationship with Dr. Harrison. She painted Sarah as a victim herself, manipulated by an older man who'd exploited her weaknesses. Several people in the gallery actually laughed at that, dark chuckles from those who'd lost everything to Sarah's real estate schemes. Then came the moment I dreaded and prepared for in equal measure. "The court will now hear victim impact statements," Judge Martinez announced. "Mrs. Monica Reeves, would you please approach?" I stood on legs that felt like water, clutching my statement with hands that wouldn't stop trembling. The walk to the podium lasted forever and an instant. When I turned to face the courtroom, my children sat directly in my line of sight, forcing me to look at what they'd become. "Your Honor," I began, voice stronger than expected, "I stand before you as a mother who failed. Not in the ways the defense suggests, by being too hard or too absent, but by being too enabling. I gave my children money instead of boundaries, rescue instead of consequences, and in doing so, I helped create the criminals who sit before you today." Jack's jaw tightened. Sarah finally looked up, tears streaming down her face. I continued, each word carefully chosen during sleepless nights at Sunrise Manor. But my failures don't excuse their choices. When Jack pushed me into that counter, breaking my ribs and threatening my life, he made a choice. When Sarah conspired with Dr. Harrison to have me declared incompetent, she made a choice. When they plotted to steal not just from me, but from 17 other elderly people who'd worked their entire lives for security, they made choices. I looked directly at my children, then meeting their eyes for what might be the last time. You were raised with love. You were taught right from wrong. You had opportunities others dream of. And you chose to become predators who fed on the vulnerable, including the woman who gave you life. Sarah sobbed audibly. Jack stared at the defense table, shoulders rigid with suppressed emotion. Other victims lost their homes, their savings, their dignity. 2 lost their lives. I was lucky. I lost only my children because I finally understood they'd been lost to me long before that day in my kitchen. The people I raised existed only in memory. The criminals before you are strangers who happen to share my DNA. I turned back to Judge Martinez. Your Honor, I ask for the maximum sentence not from vengeance, but from necessity. My children are dangerous. They've shown no genuine remorse, only regret at being caught. Even now, they see their victims as obstacles rather than people. Please protect others from what they've become. The walk back to my seat passed in a blur. Other victims spoke after me, each story a variation on the theme of trust betrayed. Margaret Hensley's daughter described finding her mother's empty bank accounts after her death. A man named Robert Chen told of losing his family business after Dr. Harrison declared him incompetent. The stories accumulated like stones, building a wall of consequences my children could no longer climb. When time came for the defendants to speak, Jack went first. He stood slowly as if the shackles weighed 1,000 pounds. I'm sorry. He said the words flat and rehearsed. I made mistakes. I got caught up in easy money and lost my way. I hope someday you can forgive me, Mom. Mistakes. As if assault and fraud were equivalent to forgetting a birthday or breaking curfew. As if 25 years of enabling crime could be dismissed with an apology delivered with all the sincerity of a greeting card. Sarah's statement carried more emotion but equal manipulation. She spoke of addiction, of desperation, of Dr. Harrison's influence. She claimed she'd never meant to hurt anyone, that things had spiraled beyond her control. She begged for understanding, for mercy, for one more chance to prove she could change. Neither of them addressed the other victims. Neither acknowledged the deaths their schemes might have caused. Neither took full responsibility for choices made with clear minds and greedy hearts. Judge Martinez listened to it all with the patience of someone who'd heard every excuse humanity could manufacture. When the last word was spoken, she shuffled her papers and delivered judgment with the finality of a closing tomb. Mr. Jack Reeves, this court sentences you to 27 years in federal prison for assault, fraud, money laundering, and racketeering. You targeted the most vulnerable members of society, including your own mother. You showed no mercy, and this court offers none in return. Jack swayed slightly but remained standing. 27 years. He'd be nearly 70 when released if he lived that long. Ms. Sarah Reeves, this court sentences you to 22 years in federal prison for fraud, elder abuse, illegal gambling operations, and conspiracy. Your attempts to paint yourself as a victim insult the actual victims whose lives you destroyed for profit. Sarah collapsed into her chair, sobbing with the abandon of someone whose last hope had evaporated. 22 years. She'd emerge at 60 alone and unemployable. Furthermore, Judge Martinez continued, both defendants are ordered to pay full restitution to their victims. though this court recognizes the impossibility of that task given the defendant's assets. Any future earnings, inheritance, or windfalls will be garnished for victim compensation. The gavel fell with finality that echoed in my chest. It was over. My children would spend decades in cells paying for crimes that had destroyed lives and families. Justice had been served cold and necessary as winter frost. As deputies prepared to lead them away, Jack turned to look at me one last time. "I hope you're happy," he said loudly enough for the gallery to hear. "You got what you wanted?" "No," I replied, standing despite my trembling legs. What I wanted was children who chose love over money, family over greed. What I got was two criminals who happened to share my blood. This isn't what I wanted. It's what you earned. They left then, shuffling in their shackles toward decades of consequences. I stood watching until the doors closed behind them, severing the last threads of a relationship that had died long before today. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed, but Walter and Eleanor formed a protective barrier guiding me to Marcus's waiting car. We drove in silence to Sunrise Manor, where my new life had taken root in unexpected soil. The facility was nothing like the depressing institutions I'd imagined. Gardens bloomed with spring flowers, residents chatted on benches under blooming dogwoods, and staff greeted me with genuine warmth. My apartment, small but sunny, overlooked the meditation garden where I'd learned to find peace in solitude. "How do you feel?" Eleanor asked as we settled in my living room with tea and cookies from the dining hall. "Empty," I admitted. "Relieved, sad, free, everything at once." "That's normal," Patricia said from the kitchenette where she was arranging the flowers she'd brought. She visited weekly, our friendship having survived my discharge from the hospital. "Grief isn't linear, especially when you're mourning people who are still alive. Over the following months, I built a new life from the ashes of the old." The Frank Reeves Nature Preserve opened in the fall, with walking trails and bird blinds, where families could connect with nature. I attended the dedication, cutting the ribbon with hands that no longer shook, surrounded by people who'd become family through choice rather than chance. The Victim Restitution Fund Eleanor had helped establish grew through donations and fundraisers. We couldn't restore what had been stolen, but we could offer support and resources to those struggling with the aftermath of elder abuse. I spoke at conferences, sharing my story with professionals who work to protect the vulnerable. Each telling got easier, the words losing their power to wound. Letters arrived from prison, occasionally forwarded through my lawyer to maintain distance. Jack's were angry screeds blaming everyone but himself for his situation. Sarah's cycled between manipulation and rage, begging for money in one paragraph and cursing my existence in the next. I read them once, then filed them away as evidence of the wisdom of my boundaries. 2 years passed before the letters stopped. David informed me that Jack had been transferred to a higher security facility after an altercation with another inmate. Sarah had found religion, or at least pretended to, joining a prison ministry that discouraged contact with toxic relationships from the past. I was apparently toxic for refusing to enable their destruction any longer. The irony wasn't lost on me. Life at Sunrise Manor suited me in ways I'd never expected. I joined the gardening club, my arthritic hands still capable of coaxing life from soil. The Parkinson's progressed, slowly managed by medication and physical therapy that insurance now covered thanks to careful financial planning. I made friends with people who understood that family came in many forms, not all of them genetic. Walter visited every Tuesday, bringing news from the old neighborhood and terrible jokes that had become oddly endearing. Eleanor, fully recovered from her hip replacement, had moved to a cottage on the preserve, where she hosted legal clinics for seniors and knitted blankets for everyone she met. Marcus stopped by monthly with updates on legislation aimed at protecting the elderly, battles fought in courtrooms and Congress, with the same determination he'd once used to investigate criminals. On quiet evenings, I sat in the garden thinking about the strange journey that had led me here. I'd lost children but gained purpose, lost family but found community, lost the life I'd planned but discovered one I'd never imagined. The pain never fully disappeared. Sometimes I'd see a mother with her adult children at the manor laughing over shared memories, and my chest would tighten with grief for relationships that had never truly existed. But more often, I felt grateful for the hard-won wisdom that love without boundaries was just another name for enabling destruction. One evening, as spring returned again to Pennsylvania, I sat with Eleanor on the preserve's observation deck, watching deer graze in the meadow that had once grown corn. "Any regrets?" she asked, needles clicking in their eternal rhythm. I considered the question watching a doe guide her fawn toward the tree line. I regret not seeing the truth sooner, not setting boundaries when they were young, not recognizing that giving them everything meant teaching them nothing. But no regrets about the trial, the sentences. None, I said firmly. They earned those consequences through choices made with open eyes and closed hearts. My only choice was whether to enable or seek justice. I chose justice for them and their victims and myself. Good, Eleanor said simply. Guilt is a luxury you can't afford and don't deserve. As sunset painted the sky in shades of rose and gold, I thought about the victims who'd found closure through our case. Families who'd received some measure of restitution. Elderly people who'd learned to recognize the warning signs of exploitation. My story had become a cautionary tale, but also one of hope, proof that it was never too late to choose yourself over those who would devour you. "You know what Frank would say?" I asked Eleanor, surprising myself with the steadiness of my voice when speaking my late husband's name. "What's that?" "He'd say the land looks better as a preserve than it ever did as a farm. That maybe everything happened the way it was supposed to, even if the journey hurt like hell." Eleanor smiled, the kind that carried understanding born from similar losses. "Frank sounds like a wise man." He was. He also would have seen through Jack and Sarah's schemes in a heartbeat. I was the soft one, the enabler, but not anymore. "No," Eleanor agreed, "not anymore." As darkness settled over Pennsylvania, bringing with it the songs of night birds and the rustle of creatures returning to land that would shelter them forever, I closed my eyes and let peace settle into bones that had known too much pain. My children sat in cells of their own making, paying for crimes that had destroyed lives and families. But I was free, surrounded by chosen family and purpose born from tragedy. It wasn't the life I'd planned at 65, but it was mine, built on boundaries and self-respect, rather than enabling and exploitation. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The Parkinsons would progress. Age would continue its relentless march. But tonight, sitting with a friend who'd become a sister, watching wildlife roam land that greed couldn't touch, I was complete. The mother who'd enabled criminals was gone. In her place stood a woman who understood that love meant saying no, that family was about choice rather than blood, and that sometimes the greatest gift you could give your children was the consequence they'd earn. Justice had been served. Redemption, at least for me, had been found. And in the space between loss and discovery, I'd learned the most important lesson of all. You can't save someone determined to drown, especially when they're trying to pull you under with them. Sometimes the only choice is to let go and swim for shore, no matter how much it hurts to watch them sink. The story that began with broken ribs and broken trust had ended with something unexpected: peace, purpose, and the profound freedom that comes from finally fully choosing yourself. As we rose to return inside, Eleanor linked her arm through mine, and together we walked toward the lights of Sunrise Manor, leaving the past to the darkness where it belonged. Tomorrow would be what it would be, but today I was home. Thank you for sharing this journey with me. If you've ever faced difficult choices with family members who put their needs above your well-being, know that you're not alone. Setting boundaries isn't cruelty, it's necessary self-preservation. What would you do if faced with a similar situation? Would you have the strength to choose justice over enabling? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if this story touched you, please like, subscribe, and share it with others who might need to hear that choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's survival. Remember, family isn't just about blood. It's about the people who stand by you when your world falls apart and help you rebuild something better from the pieces. May you find your chosen family and the courage to protect yourself from those who would harm you regardless of their relationship to you. Until next time, this is Monica reminding you that it's never too late to choose a different path, and that sometimes the hardest choices lead to the greatest freedom.